Shalom Aleichem. Today is Yov Daled B'Shvat, Erev Tu B'Shvat, Tov Shin Pei Well, according to our calendar, corresponding to the 1st of February 2025, according to the Gregorian calendar. And we continue in our studies in Sefer Yirmiyahu, Perek Shishi, chapter 6, Pasuk Tet Zayin, I believe. So, Pasuk Tet Zayin, Perek Well, Tet Zayin, chapter 6, verse 16. Ka amar Adonai, imdu al derachim ur'u, ושאלו לנתיבות עולם, איזה דרך הטוב ולחובה, ומצאו מרגוע לנפשכם, ויאמרו לא נלך. So the Navi turns to the people and says, imdu al derachim ur'u. Take a look. Al derachim literally means look at the roads or the thoroughfares, but as we're about to see in the Targum also, it's a reference to the ways of history and the history, the former generations. Take a look at what has happened in the past. That's what the Targum says over here. Yivnan amar Adonai, kumu al orhan. Stand up so you can look afar. If you want to look at something from far away, you're going to get a better view. You need to stand up. The higher you are, the better. Wahazah, and look. Sha'ilu, and ask. Nishvilin demin alama. Look at the ways of the past. Min ha'olam. The pasuk says, continues, what is the good way, the way that has produced positive results, and find that which is restful and beneficial for your souls, for yourself. This is what the Navi says to the people. The people reply, we're not going to do that. We're not interested. The Targum goes on to say over here, take a look at what has been our national experience, which is the way, which path have people chosen, have the Jewish people chosen. Washkahu wahalichuva, they walked on that path. Washkahu neyach lenafshachon, they found rest for their souls. In other words, if you look at the past, you will see, wa'amaru lo nezer, but we do not want to look. We are not interested. If I turn for a moment to over here, Rabbi Yosef Kara, who was roughly the same time, or just after Rashi, in Thorfat in Spain. I'm sorry, in France. He says as follows: "V'sha'alu l'ntivoth olam hem doroth harishonim." They look at earlier generations. Le'eze dor hishpia hakodesh baruch hu tova. In which times do you find that Hashem lavished all things good? In which time do you find such things? לדורות שהתקינו מעשיהם, or לדורות שקלקלו מעשיהם, to those generations that preceded you, that did the right thing, who walked along the correct path, or those who did the opposite. הלא, אם יראו אתכם, או יאמרו לכם לדורות שהיטיבו דרככם, הטוב, if you discover, if you see that those who walked along the correct path laid out by Hashem found it very much to their benefit. You should do the same. As the Shadal also explains over here, on the other side, in the other left-hand column, Shadal writes, because the Navi has mentioned time and again that he tries to speak to Am Yisrael, and they reject him out of hand. Omar lahem ata. Omer lahem ata. He says, I'm sorry. The Navi now says to them, Simu livavchem al darchachem, v'itbonenu b'da'atchem. Take stock of your situation and of previous generations. Mahu atov lachem u'mahu ara lachem. What is going to be in the long run for your benefit, and what is not going to be to your benefit. Asu keholachei derachim she'omedim al parashat derachim. Do as people who are on a journey somewhere, as they do. Umistaklim eze derech yichshal lechet bo. If they have two paths they can follow, one might be full of potholes, the other might be a smooth and vastly preferable path to take. They will choose the path that seems better to them. And if you cannot tell by your own investigation, ask others who are able to answer the question. That this is how the Shadar explains the two verbs in the pasuk. Ura'u v'sha'alu. Look for yourselves, and if you don't know, sha'alu, and ask others if you don't know. Kach asu atem. Zachor yemoth olam. Sha'al avicha v'yegedcha. As the Torah itself says, ask your forefathers, and they will tell you. Uvaharu b'derech hatov. Kadesh timsa'u margo ala nafshechem. This is what you should be doing. We continue. Pasuk Yal Zayin over here. V'akimothi alechem tzofim. Hakshivu lekol shofar. V'yomeru lo nakshiv. In other words, Yirmiyahu is going out of his way to show that no matter how many times he turns to Am Yisrael, they are stiff-necked people, as of course the Torah testifies in the Targum Yod Zayin 17. Wa'kemith alechon malfin. I have raised up for you. The word in the pasuk is thufim, those who see, who can see afar, who can take the long view and look at the big picture and understand where Am Yisrael needs to go. I have raised up people for you like this. In other words, Nevi'im. And here the term used by the Targum is malfin, in other words, teachers, people who can teach you. Kabilu lemile nevi'aya. And therefore you listen to the words of the Nevi'im, is the translation is the Targum. Kabilu lemile nevi'aya. This is how he translates the words. Hakshivu lekol shofar, because the Nevi'im are like a shofar. They warn of danger, and they tell you what you need to do. But the people say, Vayamaru lo nakshiv. Vayamaru lo nakabel. We're not interested. We have other ideas. We know better. Lachen shim'u agoyim ud'i idha asher eth asher bam. Therefore the Navi says, listen, people, he's turning to the nations as a whole, as it were. The Targum says, Bechen, therefore, Shema'u amam the nations, Udda'i kan ishtadi Yisrael yahu vehon. In other words, I want you, therefore, need to know, you and the nations around you need to know the truth of what you have done and how you behave, and therefore, what is going to happen, what is about to happen. Pasuk Yotef 19, Shim'i ha'ares. Listen, as it were, the land. Hine onochi mevit, Eretz Yisrael is being addressed, as it were. And that's what the Targum says, we'll see in a moment. Shim'i ha'ares. Hine onochi mevit ra'ah el ha'am hazeh. I am going to bring evil upon this people. Perim machshavotham. The fruits of their thoughts and their thinking, their way of doing things. Ki al devarai lo ikshivu v'thorati v'immasu, because they do not listen and they despise my Torah. The Targum states, Shema'i aradi Yisrael, listen, Eretz Yisrael. Ha'ana methe vishta al ama, then I am bringing evil upon this people. Tushlemath ovadehon, in other words, the just reward, the payback for their actions. Are lefit avdai neviaya, because they refused to listen and to accept the words of my avadim, my servants, the Nevi'im. That's the translation of Ki al devarai lo yakshivu. They don't listen to my words. As the Nevi'im are speaking what I tell them to speak to you. They represent me, and therefore, if you don't listen to them, you're not listening to me. Ki al devarai lo yakshivu. V'thorati v'imasuva v'oraithi v'kasuva. They hear the Torah from the Nevi'im. V'kasuba. They are mu'asim. They cannot bear to hear it. They cannot stomach it, as it were. It's disgusting to them. Let us look at some of the other mufrashim. The Malbim says over here, Ki al dvarai lo yakshivu v'thorati. In other words, the pasuk speaks about dvarai, my words, and my Torah. The Targum, as we saw, translated dvarai as the words of the Nevi'im. The Malbim here says, Ahar shelo hikshivu lidvarai shehem divrei Nevi'im. וגם לא הקשיבו לתורתי, שהם דברי התורה. In other words, there's the Nevi'im and there's the Torah itself, and they demonstrate complete lack of interest and even willingness to hear either of them. And more than that, says the Malbim, ומלבד שלא הקשיבו עוד וימסו בלב. In other words, limos, to despise, to be unable to bear something is a tnu'at nefesh. It's something internal. It's the way a person feels in his innermost being, and that's what the Malbim says. He wayimasu bah balev. In other words, the people sana'u divrei Torah, which is a terribly harsh thing to say. But that is the unfortunate reality. And the Radak here says something of value, great value. Over here, the Radak says, "V'torati wa'imasu kamo el torati lo yakshivu." In other words, they refuse to listen to the Torah. Ki al devarai, as we saw, the pasuk said, as we see here, it says devarai and it says torati. So the Radak says, Ki al devarai rotzel omar divrei hanevi'im. When I speak about my words, it's the words of the Nevi'im that you're hearing today, the words of Yirmiyahu, for example. Divrei Nevi'im shemazhirim otham, who speak to them directly. V'torati rotzel omar Torat Moshe. The Torah refers to the Torah which is from ancient times, well before Yirmiyahu, Torat Moshe. Lo dai shelo hikshivu la. Not only do they not take note of it, when they are told to return to the Torah, they actually, as we saw a moment ago, they hate it, as the Malbim wrote, that people have no stomach for the Torah, as it were. It revolts them. They don't want to hear it or read it. And here he adds something interesting. Which is when the Sefer Torah was found hidden in the Mikdash, apparently hidden there during the persecutions and the government policy of assimilation and Avodah Zarah led by Menashe. כי בימי יאשיהו, כשמצא חלקיהו ספר התורה, ויקראו בה, היה חידוש אצלם, כי כבר שכחו אותה. They had already forgotten the Torah. The Torah was already far from their thoughts, and not at all something with which they were familiar or willing to become familiar. And unfortunately, this reminds us of our current situation. There are many Jews who, um, in the world in general and in Israel specifically today, there are many Jews who are the result of three or more generations, sometimes more, of shemad or voluntary, either voluntary shemad or imposed shemad. The word shemad means basically being um, removed from and shut off from the Torah, either because this is what certain Jews chose for themselves, or because that is the reality in which they found themselves. And so sometimes a person can even be more responsible and guilty for his situation, and sometimes much less so. And that is the concept of that someone can be kathinok nishba, the famous term that the Rambam uses in Choth Mamrim Perek Sheni, that a Jew can be brought up in a home, in a community, in a place, and a time where, through no fault of his own, he knows nothing about the Torah. This is true, unfortunately. And we see that sometimes they can become much more than not being familiar with the Torah, but actually a hatred of the Torah. And this was already the situation. That's what the Radak just mentioned, that this was already the situation in the time of Yirmiyahu, that many Jews were unable to even conceive of listening to the Torah. It was so foreign to them. So Pasuk Kaf here says, Lama zali levona mishava favor v'khaneh hatov me'aretz merhak. Olotechem lo l'rathon v'zivhechem lo aravu li. Here we see something very interesting. The Navi speaks about the fact that, and yet, despite what we just said, apparently because of some kind of habit or some kind of residual masortiut, some kind of traditional attachment to ancient traditions, there were still many of these people who are far from the Torah, who were still bringing korbanot, or would come to the Mikdash and what have you, olofechem lo l'rason, etc. Why are you bringing me these korbanot? You do not understand that these sacrifices or other forms of worship in the Mikdash do not stand alone, cannot stand alone. That's what the Targum says over here in Pasuk Kaf. Lemad nan kadamai levonatha demishava tethe ukenet tuva me'ara rahika. Why do you bring me these sweet-smelling spices for the ketoreth and other things from distant lands? Allah wathachon la l'ra'wa, the korbanot, the olot that you bring, I'm not interested in. V'nichsat kudshechon la yitkabelun kadamai. So it seems that, despite what we just said, there were no small number of Jews who continued, and also the Mikdash was still was operational. The Mikdash was there, and the Mikdash is representing the entire people. But if the people live their lives in a manner which is completely opposed to the Torah and cannot possibly be reconciled with the Torah, a way of life which is anti-Torah in every way, certain traditional activities or customs cannot make up for that. So it's again similar to our situation today. There are many Jews who choose to live their lives, or that is what they used to, that they think it's okay to live like goyim, or to act in a way which is completely diametrically opposed to the Torah, but yet they want to have a seder, or they want to they wanted to go to shul on Rosh Hashanah and buy an aliyah to the Torah and make a big donation to the Bet Knesset, but then do all sorts of other things which are unspeakable. So this is unacceptable. People have to understand this is not possible. So what do we see here in the Farshim? The Malbim says something here which is, I think, worth reading. Obviously, everything the Malbim says is worth reading, but we don't learn every word of every Mefarish when we learn here together. But we'll look at what the Malbim here writes. He says, "Lama li misvot hadashim lo bikashti otam miyadchem." You come up with all kinds of new ideas that I did not ask for. אחר אשר גם לעולותיכם הם לא לרצון, וזה הנמשל על עומדו על דרכים שנדמו, כאילו עבדו דרך וביקשו דרכים חדשים, ומצוות חדשות, אשר בדו מליבם. In other words, the Malbim seems to understand from this pasuk that on the one hand they're not living according to the Torah, but they do come up with all manner of things that they bring to the Mikdash, or all kinds of newfangled ideas, or things they copied from the Goyim. Those who wish to, on the one hand, throw off the yoke of the Torah. Again, sounds similar, and I think it's not by accident that it sounds similar to our situation, because the Malbim was already aware in his time in Romania and in the 19th century. He was very aware of Reformed Jews and all sorts of things of this, and he had run-ins with such people. In fact, as a Rav, he fought ideological battles and communal battles against all kinds of reformers and people who were trying to remake the Torah in their own image. And in his own way, I think he's reading from his own reality into the time of Yirmiyahu, and it's very possible. We don't know exactly what was going on at the time of Yirmiyahu, but it's very possible that something very similar was going on there. That's what the Malbim suggests. Pasuk Kaf Aleph. Lachen, ko amar Adonai, therefore, thus says Hashem, Hineni noten el ha'am hazeh michsholim. I am going to bring about situations and realities that will bring about their downfall of these people. V'chashalu them, avot uvanim yahdo. Both the fathers and their children, there was multi-generational calamity will come upon the Jewish people. Shachen ure'o wa'avadu. And the Judean society is about to be turned. There will be a great upheaval and will be overturned. The Targum says in Pasuk Kaf Aleph, "B'chen kidnan amar Adonai ha'ana meteh alama haden takulan we takulun bahon." I will bring about various situations that will be a takala. Takala is something which causes you to stumble. Avahan uvanin kahda megir v'karive. Megir is a shachen. Yevedun will be lost. In other words, this society is committing suicide, basically, and I will allow it to happen, and I will encourage it, because this is the only possible outcome for what they do. The Shadal explains that the Michsholim refers to the enemies, the Bavlim, Babylonians are about to descend on Eretz Yisrael. Pasuk Kaf Beth. Ko amar Adonai, Hine am ba me'aretz Thafon. So you see the Perush of Shadal is referring to the Oivim that are about to come directly is indicated immediately in the pasuk that follows immediately. Hine am ba mi'aretz Safon, a nation is going to come from the north. Bavel is to the northeast. V'roi gadol, a great powerful nation. Yi'or mi'ad kethei aretz, a great powerful nation is going to come upon you, descend upon you, as it says here in the Targum. Kidnan, so Kidnan amar Adonai ha, amma atem me'ara sipona wa'amma min rav ravin yethon. In other words, when the Targum translates the words "V'roi gadol," a great nation, the Targum explains it's not because it just said it said Am ba mi'aretz Safon, so that's the nation that's coming from the north. So who are the Amamim? Who is the Goy Gadol? Targum explains other nations that are part of the empire, as we've explained before. An empire is usually made up of more than one nation, more than one ethnic group. So you have the Bavlim, who are the central power in that empire, in the Babylonian Empire, but there were other subordinate nations, and they will come too. Amamin Rav Ravin, great nations. Yethon Birelai Misiafe Ara. They are going to awaken and come and overrun you. Pasuk Kaf Gimel. Keshet v'chidon ziko. Achzarihu v'lo yirahemu. Kolam kayam yahama v'al susim yirkavu. Aruch ke'ishmi lamilhama alayich bat Sion. So a great military power is about to come up against you. So it describes Kesheth, bows, and Kidon, spears. Achzarihu, they are cruel, they have no mercy. Kolam kayam yehemeh, the sound that they make as they come towards you is like the sound of the sea, very great. Wa'al susim yirkavu, and they have many horses, cavalry. Only powerful empires could afford such a large military force, and horses were a major military asset in those days. Aruch ke'ishmit lamilchama alayich bat Sion. They're coming up against you, Yerushalayim, bat Sion. Nothing special to add there on that pasuk right now. We'll continue pasuk Kaf Gimel. Shamanu as Shom'o rafu yadenu. We've heard about these people. We were aware of this Babylonian Empire. Rafu yadenu, and our hands are without strength. We are completely afeared of them. Thara ehzikathnu hil kayoleda. We are overcome by our trouble, and we are like a woman who is in labor. In other words, suffering and unable to do anything about it. As it says here in the Targum, Shemana Yath Shim'eh, we have heard about these people and their power. Ithra Shala Yadana, our hands are unable, we are unable to help ourselves. Akka Ahadathna, this great trouble is about to take hold of us. Ha Kehivlin Layalivta, like the labor pains of a woman in labor. We are suffering, we know we're about to suffer, but we can do nothing about it. Pesuk Kafeh. Al tes'u hasodeh uvaderech al telechu. Do not go out into the field. Do not travel on the roads. Ki hadev lo'oyev magor misaviv. Here already Yirmiyahu seems to be describing the reality of in Eretz Yisrael and the countryside as it is being overrun by the Bavlim, by the Babylonians. It says here in the Targum, La fi pekun lahakla, do not go out to the field. Uve'orha la tahachun, do not travel on the roads. Are harba de sana'a mekatala, there are sword-bearing enemies out there. Kanshin misahor sahor, and there is terror all around. My people, you should don sackcloth as signs of mourning, and sit and cover yourselves with ash, also a sign of mourning. Evel yahid asilach mispad tamrurim ki pithom yavo hashoded alenu. It's describing a terrible calamity that is now taking place. The Targum says, Kinishta da'ami, my people, esarus sakin, put on sackcloth, havo reshechon, and cover your heads, bekitma, with ash, eval kiyahid avadul lechon. There are those who explain this to refer to mourning for a yahid, an only child. Mispad mimrar arebith bithchef yethon bazazin alana. You should begin to mourn your situation, because the tragedy is about to befall you very suddenly, very quickly. Pasuk Kavzaim, Bahon nefaticha v'ami mivsar v'theda'u v'hanta et darkan. This is Hashem speaking to Yirmiyahu, and he says to him, Bahon nefaticha v'ami mivsar, I have placed you as a special individual. Here in the Targum it says Bahir, someone special, chosen. Yahavtach ba'ami kichrach takif, I have placed you like a walled city, with the hoda or with the hawel lahon yah orahon, and you are to tell, and you are to tell them and explain to them what is happening and why it is happening. Here, Pasuk Kaf Zayin. Look at the Mefarshim here. The Radak says over here, Bahon, Amar Navi Afal Pishata Omer Lahem Devarim Kashim, Umithnabe Alehem Ra'oth, even though it has been your destiny, it has been your lot to inform them of terrible things, Umithnabe Alehem Ra'oth, and to prophesy negative things that will befall them. Al Tiramehem, do not fear them. If you recall, this is also what Hashem said to Yirmiyahu when he quite some years before, in the very first perek and the second perek of Yirmiyahu, where he tells him, Yirmiyahu complains, I'm a young person and they don't know me. They've never heard of me, and I'm going to tell them all these things. They're not going to listen to me, and I'm scared of them also. They will probably want to harm me, maybe kill me. Hashem says to him, Al tiramehem, do not fear them. Ki bahon umitzana faticha lahem. I've placed you as a bahon. Now he explains the term bahon, perusho mitzar, the fortress. Kamo hakimu behuno. Brings a pasuk in Yeshaya. We also see this term used in the sense of a fortress. In other words, you are going to be a powerful and yet, even though you say things to them they do not wish to hear, nevertheless they will be unable to harm you, because you will be like a fortress. That's what I just mentioned, that this is what he said to him at the beginning of, we see in the beginning of Sefer Yirmiyahu. In the first parak we saw the same idea. I've set you up as a fortress city and a pillar of iron. and therefore do not fear them, and take note of what they do. In other words, take note of their actions and tell them why this is happening to them. Do not fear them. In other words, do not spare them the bitter truth. They need to hear. They need to hear the truth, even though it's not at all what they want to hear, and it won't make you popular. Pasuk Kavheth. Kulam sararim. Holechei rachil nahoshet uvarzel. Kulam mashhitim hema. They are all of them wayward in the extreme. Sareh sararim. Holechei rachil. They spread lashon hara. Rachil. Nahoshet uvarzel. Kulam mashhitim hema. In other words, they are all brazen-faced. They have no, not even able to be embarrassed at what they, with regards to their actions. This is also something we saw last time. It says in the Targum, Kol Rav Vehon Maradin. The Targum, even though the Pasuk says Kulam, all of them, Sareh Sararim, which means all of them, but literally, but the Targum explains that it's talking about the leaders. Kol Rav Vehon, all their leaders, the powerful, Maradim, they are all rebellious again towards me. Mahalchin b'nechilu kamod ma'arav nahashim barzel, and they are all they deal falsely. Like those who also try to debase metal. In other words, when something's supposed to be pure copper, they add iron to it because it's cheaper, and they debase the metal. In other words, they're not honest. They are all, the Targum is kulam mehabbalim inun. They're all people who create and do terrible things. We continue, Pasuk Kaftet. Nahar mapuach me'esh tam ufareth. Lashal saraf sarof v'ra'im lo nitaku. Here the Pasuk states as follows. They are being compared to the furnace of a person working with metals, like lead. The Targum says, Ha kemashav napahin deharar b'chol nura, just as the bellows that creates the air, that pushes air onto the flame to increase the temperature of the crucible in which the metals are melted, etc.
The forge.
The forge or the crucible, right? Just as the napahin, napah is the person who works with these metals, and he has a mashav, which causes the wind to blow into the forge, into the furnace. Ken has korahon denivayah demitnabanahon. So is the voice of the Nevi'im who speak to them, who told them to return to the Torah. In other words, the Nevi'im spoke loudly and made their words heard, but it made no difference. Lashel Saraf Sarof. It is as if the he who works with these metals and is trying to change the metal and to melt it and to make it cause it to respond to his will, the metal worker or the goldsmith, and is unsuccessful. V'ra'im lo nitaku. All that the Nevi'im tries to say to them, La lahana'a alefunun malfehon. Everything that they said to them did not make a difference. It was not accepted. They did not turn their backs on their evil. They did not change their course. Rashi explains over here. Nahar mapuach. Mashalhu. This is a mashal. Keshesorofim kesef. When the goldsmith is trying to purify silver. Nofahim b'mapuach. There is the bellows that creates the introduces the air into the forge, into the crucible. B'mapuach notnim tamid oferet b'toch hakur u'ma'il lisrof. And you add other substances into the furnace as well in order to achieve the desired result. Avalatem bati lisrof etchem. I have tried to pure, and one of the things we're trying to do with precious metals like silver or gold is to remove the impurities by heat, and the metal melts and the impurities separate. You can separate when it melts, you can separate the impurities from the pure metal that you're interested in. Avaratem bati lisrof etchem. I have tried to purify you. Hamapuach nahar v'nehrach mikoach ha'esh, and the bellows have done the most that they can do. They've made lots of noise, and in fact have been burnt by the fire. Witham ha'oferet kulo, and all the metal is gone, and nothing comes of it. And ורעים לא ניתקו מדרכם הרעה, כלומר יגעו הנביאים להוכיח ולא הועילו. The Nevi'im have tried again and again to have an impact and make a difference, and they were unable to do so. All right, so we have this last pasuk for today. Kasef nim'as kara'u lahem, ki ma'as Adonai bahem. Targum says, Ha kichsaf pasola barahakin karolahon. They, the people, are now can be justly referred to as kesef pasol. Pasol, in other words, metal that cannot be purified, that cannot be improved. Ki ma'as Adonai bahem. Hashem is literally sick of them and is unable to deal with them any further. Radak says over here, Kesef nimas, wahar shelo nitku mira'atam. And now, seeing that they have refused to separate themselves from their evil, just like precious metal that refuses, as it were, to be purified, hinehem kesef nimas. They are now despised and unwanted. Those who know them call them and compare them to such metal that refuses to be purified. So we said that we shall stop here for today.
Very good.
Unfortunately, we see that Yirmiyahu was unable to make an impact on the Jewish people. And we seem to be very intent upon following in our forefathers' footsteps. Unfortunately, there is still much work to be done. Tov, Hayu Beruchim, Hazak, Hizku Yames Levavchem. Kol Amyahalim Ladonai. Shalom v'nisahon.